Hello and welcome to Rappler Talk. My name is Amanda Lago. So, if you've been anywhere on the internet this year, you might have noticed that there have been a lot of podcasts by Filipino podcasters coming out online, from entertainers to entrepreneurs to even, your friend. Everyone's turning to podcasts to start conversations, also to fill their days, I guess. So, in this two-part Rappler Talk, we have Rappler's very own podcasters, and we're going to ask them what it's like to host and manage a podcast, especially in these extraordinary times. So please welcome podcast hosts Margie Alcazaran de Leon, Bigo, Tristan Zinampan, and Pawi Betanga. Hi, guys.
Everyone.
Hey.
So to begin with, let's go around and everyone introduce your podcast and tell us what they're about.
Is it clockwise?
Yeah. Margie,
Sure.
go
Are we
first.
seeing the same gallery? Okay, you go first, Margie.
So, hi, I'm Margaret De Leon. I'm Rappler's opinion editor, and I host I've Got an Opinion. It's like, I guess, the home podcast for Rappler's opinion section, also known as the Voices section. It is, I call it the podcast where ordinary people talk about extraordinary issues. So I get people, because everybody has like a strong opinion about something. And the thing is, like, there are some topics where few people are able to really speak up about it. And I want to find these people. And more often than not, they're not like particularly extraordinary individuals. They're just like you and us, you and me. Ayun. So the past few episodes have been about, let's say, BDSM, bisexuality. The one that's coming out later tonight, as of this recording, is about someone who was pro Marcos but changed his mind. So that's the vibe that my podcast is all about. It's just an interview podcast.
Nice. So like unpopular opinions, kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe that's a spin-off.
Yeah. How about Pawi and Tristan?
I'm
Tell
gonna
us
let
about-
Pawi do the
Okay.
intro because he does
Sure.
this
So-
every time we record.
So I'm Pawi. I am a producer and co-host of Hustle's Inside the Industry podcast. So we're under Hustle. So we're mostly targeted towards young adults, millennials. As the name entails, focus on careers and business. So we cover a wide variety of industries. I say a little spiel at the start of the podcast,
Sample.
where I say the inside the industry, where we talk to professionals and find out how they got there, why they do what they do, and what it takes to do it. I'm Pawi, and this is...
Tristan. Yun lang. That's what I
Are we
do.
gonna listen to it?
Downstairs.
Yeah. Tristan, why don't you tell them, I guess, some of the industries and the kinds of people we've covered?
So dati we started with, actually before Pawi came in, it was a rotating set of hosts. So there was Bea, Kupin, our LSE editor. B also hosted
B is
episode.
was
The
the
first-
mother of
first,
this
yeah.
podcast.
The pilot.
Yeah, I was the
Uh,
pilot. Interviewed Jake Letts on managing.
So there you go, sports. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Hustle was formed and the podcast was put under Hustle, that's when Pao and I became the more regular hosts. So we've done episodes on sports, so like what you mentioned, video games. That's a cool episode.
Yeah. I
We
love
did
that.
a lot on comics and film. So there's Mikael Red, and on the comic side there's the owner of Comic Cat, Paulo Heras. So we've also done something on sports law / world building because Mickey Ingles, our sports
Shout out to
content, he
Mickey.
actually wrote a book about a YA book about a Manila underground. So
Yeah.
So a lot. Like it's,
we've covered a lot of
And I think-
filter industries.
And so
Wow.
same as Margie's podcast, it's a guest style talk show. So the episodes vary because it's a different guest each episode and rotating industries. But the kind of idea is that we hope to reach out to young listeners who are at crucial points of their lives where they're trying to figure out which paths they want to take. and we're kind of presenting what those paths could be,
Right.
and the journeys those people took.
Yeah, kasi
These are the
parang,
options you
yeah,
have.
the idea is like there are many industries in Metro Manila and the Philippines in general that we are not aware of na, okay, may video game industry pa dito. So if that's something that you want to do, this, what it takes to do it, this, like, the story behind people who are doing it. So, maganon.
So like you're giving everyone a mini mentor, like for,
Yeah.
like you can follow this person and see how he did it. Cool. That's super cool. How about you, B? What's your podcast about?
Okay, so hi, I'm Digo. I'm the multimedia sports reporter of Rappler, and I host Targeting Tokyo, which is a documentary style podcast. So it's unlike Margie's, Powie's, and Tristan's, that it's a talk show podcast. Mine is more of like it has a lot of sound design. It's like an audiobook basically. So it's about the stories of Filipino Olympic hopefuls since the Tokyo 2020 Olympics is supposed to happen this year, but then it got postponed. So we got a whole year to actually find out what the stories of these Filipino Olympic hopefuls, like what they're doing either during the pandemic, or it can actually just be like a documentary about their life. Like how did they become so good in their sport that they're able to actually nail the Olympics already. So I've actually started this podcast because I was part of like a Women in Youth and Sport fellowship last May, and then the fellowship, the product is supposed to be a podcast. So I was like, oh no, like by that time, I think there were just too many talk show podcasts already in the market, and especially in sports, because everyone's just like, let's start a
Right.
podcast. But then I wanted to do something like super different and something to challenge myself. And I think I really did challenge myself in this podcast because I had it's part as part of my fellowship. I had to do the interviews on my own. I made the script on my own, got the approval of the Rappler bosses. Then I did the edits on my own, and that's just so
The
Yeah.
one-woman
far out of
team.
my
Congrats.
Editor.
yeah, I know. So I guess I was just really proud. Like when we released the first episode, it first got released with all the other people in the fellowship. Like it became part of like an album on Apple Podcast. Then I also, of course, released it on Rappler with our own graphics. Like our graphics team made a really cute chibi like
Yeah. It's a the blue
album
one.
cover and everything.
Chibi.
Yeah,
Chibi.
chibi.
Right. You know what? Graphics are so important to what we do because they're like the only other information you get from a podcast.
That's true.
Right? You just get the picture and you get the sound, and you hope that those in tandem can really bring in an audience.
Yeah. Like the graphics for Margie's podcast is, I love it.
God.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
The goat's changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sheep. Is it a sheep?
For
It's
those
a
who are
sheep.
unfamiliar,
The sheep, sorry.
yeah, like
Yeah.
there's a sheep. It was thought up of by Emil, Sir Emil.
Oh
the
wow.
graphics head. Yeah.
Shout out.
We were trying. My peg really was something like very vibrant and very kind of like propaganda postery.
Oh.
Yeah. So and then he gave the idea of the black sheep. So our graphics is like a black sheep among like regular sheep. And then every episode, starting on the third episode, like because it only occurred to me then, to dress the black sheep up in whatever that topic was.
So
So
good.
like for this recent episode on Pro Marcos, nakasuot siya ng red na t-shirt, tapos may mga Pro Marcos ano siya. For the BDSM one, he had like
Yeah, that's the one that stood out the most.
all gag. I think basta may ganun.
Yeah.
Tapos for the wikang, ano yun? What do you call this? Linggo ng Wika episode, nakasalakot siya, yung mga ganun. So,
Ganda.
it's really cute. Parang it's like this little tidbit that you kind of look forward to every week.
Yeah. Exactly
Google
what Paolo
Doodle.
said.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Changing. Yeah.
So how did you guys get into podcasts? Because I mean, I'm sure all of us, everyone now, well, not everyone, most people probably like listen to podcasts, whether intently or not. how did you guys start listening to and then doing your own podcast?
Okay, yeah, I can start. So in sports, like I do listen to a lot of sports podcasts, and it's mainly the NBA. So I started there. I do listen to The Jump by Rachel Nichols because I don't know, like I also mentioned it like in one article I wrote about sports podcast that I seem to just listen to female voices. Like for some reason, like I get like, I know that the NBA is like there are so many like it's so male dominated, like you just hear like men bantering, and I think I just got so sick of that, and then I found this The Jump, and I was just so into it. Like I liked how she interviews like players, and then she also gives her own analysis. I don't know, I just felt so empowered by listening to her, and then that then that's how I kind of spiraled down the
The
podcast
podcast.
hole, especially in sports. So my one of my favorites right now is Burn It All Down, which is also like that's a very feminist sports podcast. So they talk about women in sports, their problems, especially over in the US, since the anchors are mostly based in the US. And then my friends also in the sports industry got into podcasting. So
Mm-hmm.
I listened to What's Your Point? That's hosted by my friend Camille Naredo and Migs Flores, and that's where they talk about volleyball. And like since I'm friends with them, I feel like sometimes when I'm listening to them, I just wanted to make a comment, then I realized like, oh, oops, wala pala sila doon, ganon, ganon level. So I just and then like my other friend Siege Tantenko also started Go Hard Girls. So
Yay!
that's she's
Shout
also
out to
an
Sage.
inspiration to my podcast because it's a highly produced documentary style podcast also. And she has a team to help her do that. That's why it's just so amazing how she gives and her topic she gives really she really highlights women's basketball and all the female athletes who have been in male dominated sports like even Nesty Petesio and Josie Gabuco, who are really great female amateur boxers here in the Philippines.
Yeah. So how did you go from listening to like when did it occur to you now, oh,
Mhm.
I can make a podcast too?
Of course, I think like my podcast is actually like a product that in of quarantine
Yeah.
also. Like I actually like among the three podcasts, mine is the one that started during the quarantine because the fellowship opportunity came up, and by that time like sports was kind of like, oh my gosh, there are zero events to
Mhm.
cover by that was around April, May, right? Like all sports events were banned. There was hardly anything to to write about. Like, features go can only reach like a certain point, like especially for like Rappler Sports that is like very focused on sports news also. So that's when it occurred to me that hey, like this my fellowship is offering this podcasting opportunity. So I asked I asked my boss, si Ma'am Jazz, kung if I can, if I could join, and then then I applied for it. I got in, and then I took maybe a 4 week intensive course on like podcasting. So it was a lot of
That's a lot.
information. Like,
Wow.
yeah,
So
4 weeks, that's a
even
month.
it was like
even
focused on podcasting your fellowship.
yeah, it was all podcasting, like in the context of sports. But then the person teaching, kasi he wasn't a sports person. It's just he knows a little bit of sports, but then like his main main well, he works in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and his main job is to produce the podcast. So he does all the he even does the interviews and even the editing on Reaper, which I took like a mini course from. And
Mhm.
that's how I got into like editing my own podcast also, because I
Wow.
was just like, oh, I gotta learn this software, but of course I failed at like learning Reaper. It was just so hard. Like alam mo yung pati the usual cut button in the usual video editors, it won't work, or the delete button won't work. I was like, I think there's really something wrong with the software. I gave
Mhm.
up. So I just used the video editor. Yeah, and then yeah, that's how I think that's basically how I got into like committing myself to the podcast because I just didn't want to produce a one-off thing for Rappler. I wanted to make it like something long term, something sustainable. And since it's a documentary style, like it can be like a series. I thought it could be like a series kind of thing. Like this is Tokyo 2020, and then there's going to be like a new set after that.
Nice. So how about Margie? How did you get into podcasting, listening and making one?
For listening, I've loved podcasts for years. As in, I'm kind of like a big nerd about it. I started listening like I don't know, mga 7 years ago.
Before it was
And
cool.
yeah. So, medyo. It was mostly for like mental health kasi parang I just like having a voice other than my own in my head. So I'm a big trivia person at heart. So like the first few podcasts that I really got into were Stuff You Should Know.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you call this? Ano yan? Wait, I'm looking at my phone right now. What do you call
Revisionist
this?
history.
Stuff you missed in history class. Stuff you missed in history
Oh.
class. Basta stuff like that. Yun.
Okay.
So mga very informational podcasts. And then the longer I worked at Rappler, the more political the podcasts I listened to were. So like right now, I'm looking at my Stitcher app, and I'm listening to, let's see, Post Reports, The Weeds,
The Weeds.
Who Is, This Day in Esoteric Political History.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So, and
I
then of
just have
course I still
NPR.
have trivia stuff. Like there's this thing called Side Door, which is by the Smithsonian. So parang they get like a random artifact in the museum and then they just talk about the
Oh.
story behind it. It's
Yeah.
super cool.
Wow.
Yun. So, basta mga ganon. Tapos I also like comedy podcasts, mga ganon. The one podcast parang genre I can't get into for some reason is fiction, which is ironic because I write, pero I find it kind of hokey. Like, I love documentary podcasts. Pero when it's like, I don't know, when it's like fiction tapos may acting sa boses, like I can't get into it. I don't know why.
Siguro
Anyway,
kasi, parang
ayun.
radio drama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Associate.
It's like a radio drama. Yeah,
Well,
exactly. That's the original.
So, ayun. So suffice it to say that I've always wanted to have a podcast of my own. It's just that I never had like the, what do you call this, the equipment. And at the time before Rappler wasn't into podcasts then, but now that yun nga, that Rappler is like beefing up its podcast game, that's when I thought na okay, I have to get in this. And then I was made voices editor, so parang okay, this is it. This is the opportunity for it. And I chose an interview style because it's an opinion podcast, so it can't just be me. Alam mo yun, hindi siya me na podcast. It has to be about other people. And what better way to get other people's opinions than to have them just talk about it. Yun. And I would like to think that this particular podcast is unique kasi I don't know of any other parang Filipino podcast that focuses on like super taboo topics.
Yeah.
So, yun. Tapos,
It's very
it just-
provocative.
yeah, yun. So parang, although, ayun, it just so happens na I have apparently a very weird like friend base on
Yeah,
it's like when
apparently.
I topic, kinakabahan ako kasi parang shit, kailan parang will I be able to get a guest for this topic? And then when I put the call out there, like within the day, like I get someone, like for example, there's a BDSM, like I was thinking, is someone gonna parang answer to this? And then like several popped up. So I have like really freaky circles.
Mhm.
Ayun. So yeah, so parang kind of dream come true siya na I have the podcast now. And yun, I can only hope to make it better from here on.
Nice. Tristan and Paui?
Ako ba? I'll
Yeah,
go
you go first.
Yeah. So I started like listening to podcasts with Serial, like many people. So
My God, I
yeah,
love
diba? So it's like I think that's really when when podcasts started becoming mainstream with Serial. So I was like part of that wave when you had to download it. Pa. It's not
Mhm.
you didn't see it on Spotify or like apps. You had to download each episode. So that's when I really when I was first introduced into podcasts. Then from there, like upon appreciating that show, parang it led me down the rabbit hole na, okay, I wanna listen to more podcasts. So I went from there. I went to like things like revisionist history. Kasi like Margie, I'm also a huge trivia person. So ako personally, like what I want are those, I call them Pocahontas facts. Kasi parang things I never knew. Di ba? A call to the wind.
I was like, where's this going?
Di ba? Di ba?
Be racist.
So yung things I never knew. So parang revisionist history. I like
Yeah.
lore. There's this podcast,
Lore, yeah, that's classic.
Aaron Mankey called Lore. So it's about like my historical basis of aliens and ghosts and urban legends and like that stuff. So parang you try to from there I'm just led to other genres. And then that led me to film podcasts kasi I'm a film student. I was a film student. So that led me to like The Watch, Fighting in the War Room, and then I just really liked listening to these people argue about film, discuss film. Kasi like I watch a lot of movies, I watch a lot of TV shows, and then it's like the need to unpack things with other people. Pero like many of the things I watch, ako lang naman ang nanonood. So it's really refreshing na if you want to recap a show like Westworld before or Game of Thrones, the recapables or the rewatchables, nandun sila to like, okay, this is what happened during the last episode. And that led me to forming our own Filipino film podcast around 3 years ago. So it was called Third World Cinema Club. So it was with my friends. So parang, okay, let's just talk about film. Let's just converse about Cinemalaya, those things. So when I entered Rappler, hindi pa ako agad into the podcasting game or into like what Rappler was doing. Kasi and actually ako rin, I'm not that comfy like interviewing people. Parang comfortable lang ako when I'm discussing or like pag may mga batuhan ng opinion, ganyan. So when Bea asked me na, oh, do you want to interview rin for inside the industry? Sabi ko, sige, pero ayun, parang there was apprehension on my part kasi I know I'm not the most articulate person. I'm not the most, ano ba? Yung nga, I frequently find myself at a loss for words and I stutter a lot. So sabi ko, kaya ko ba ito na ako lang at saka yung tao? What if may a lot of dead air? So luckily, after a while, Pawi came in. So,
Nice segue. Nice segue.
And the rest is history. Like we've been doing inside the industry for like a year now. Almost
every week.
Yeah, every week.
Every week, yeah.
Every Monday.
Does
Yeah.
it help, Tristan, that like you know it's not video? Like, do you stutter less or do you have more words when
Actually,
you know that you're not on video?
in a way, kasi like, yung nga, I think if it's Zoom, okay rin lang na we're doing this. Pero like, as B would know, when we did like, anong ginawa natin yung with volleyball? Train like,
The train like a series of hustle.
I'm really awkward in front of the camera. Kasi kaya, that's why I'm a producer. I like doing things behind the scenes. So,
Yeah.
Right.
pero it kind of helps rin. And lalo na if like you have more people with you, it's like, if you actually have a conversation going on, it's like, it's more organic
Yeah.
rather than like, personal ko lang yun like, if it's just one person and the person is like someone that you don't know, it's not.
Yeah, it's a gamble.
Build rapport. So I really like, saludo ako sa inyo na who can do like Rappler live jam. I got an opinion, like talk to people who are kind of strangers, but then like really build rapport with them.
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
Shout out to Amanda.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm last. I'm last here. But really quick, Actually, I have a very interesting story about how I got into listening to podcasts. So none of you know this. I got into podcasts in 2016 because I was living in New York, and I was like a night crawler, like in the movie Nightcrawler with Jake
Jake
Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal.
So I was actually chasing down crime scenes for a year. Like, this is not a joke. Yeah, I was chasing down crime scenes for like over a year in New York City, and working like my shifts were like 9 p.m. to like 4 a.m. And I had like my GPS and everything, and kind of like, what are you gonna do in the dead time, in between like covering different scenes and stuff. So I had my location set up around Manhattan, mostly like different Barnes and Noble, different Starbucks, different McDo, because Starbucks and McDo, those would be 24 hours. And because my phone was also my tool, I could only use so much of the bat. I was doing all this for an app, by the way. So and they're pretty popular now. And so to pass the time, I would listen to audiobooks first, and then once those would run out, I was just like, I'm like getting used to this audio media. I checked out podcasts. My first podcast, so similar to Tristan and Margie, but my first podcasts were kind of just to educate myself more. I felt like I was doing that job mostly to get paid, to be honest. They were paying me well, but simultaneously I felt I could like level up as like a growing adult, which I was. So I listened to like Freakonomics, Tim Ferriss show, and eventually, I'm like Tristan. I'm in the film industry myself, and I decided to start my own podcast. I had a small stint running my own podcast. It was called The Small Break, where I interviewed first-time feature-length film directors. So I was able to interview Treb Montreras of Respeto.
Eto.
And I interviewed Kathy Yan, who's the director of Birds of Prey. So those were probably like my two biggest guests. And then as V mentioned, it's kind of tough to do everything and manage your own podcast. So I kind of, even though I was getting what I thought was like a good amount of listeners, I was like, where is this going, right? Eventually, I would move back to the Philippines. Ended up in Rappler, working with Tristan on hustle stuff. I was gonna maybe leave for work, where he's like, hey, if you stay for a bit, why don't you join our recording over there with Paula Harris for Comic Cat, because you ran your own podcast, right? And I was like, yeah, sure. And yeah, that's
Then
how it started.
slowly, but I gave more work.
Yeah, and then Tristan started disappearing. Ikaw na, bro, ikaw na. Yeah.
It was
So,
Tristan slowly passing on.
yeah, subliminal. It's
Yeah.
like, you enjoy this.
Yeah.
Parang it follows lang.
This Rappler Talk, nag-fade ka na. Wala ka na dito.
And
Yeah.
we'll have known why.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, Pawi, managing a podcast. Like, for you guys, what's that like at this moment in time when we're all locked down? Plus, like Tristan mentioned, building rapport. How do you do that with your guests now?
Kasi yun, I started the podcast before the pandemic, and one of the things I enjoyed the most before this all happened was getting people to go to the studio and talking to them in the
Yeah.
studio, like all professional like.
Yeah.
Alam mo yun? And it was nice kasi parang, syempre, besides like the quality of the recording, it's just nice to see people, like, it's just nice to invite people to the office, and you get to talk more about like your work then and stuff like that. Wala. So it was easy to
Oh yeah, shout out to The Office, but that's The Office, by the way, where Tristan.
Oh, yes. Okay. Ayun. So parang, and it's easier to build rapport because of that. Kasi parang syempre they'll have questions about parang, oh, who's this? Like, what's happening here? Ganon. So ngayon, it's kind of like parang cold turkey na you just like kind of meet them online, you message them, and then you eventually Zoom with them. And ayun, it's easier to book, of course, a guest because you're just stuck at home, so wala silang takas.
Yeah.
They can't really rearrange their schedules or whatever, or ano, parang they can't make up excuses as often. But uh, going back, it's a bit off tangent, but going back to your question kay Tristan about like, is it easier to talk if it's like parang audio only? For me, it's actually easier kung in person or on video because you see the physical, the facial cues of the person, and parang yun nga, you end up like interrupting the person because when it's on audio only, so it's kind of like awkward. Ayun. But of course, like best practices is to record audio only, diba?
Yeah.
Given like our shitty internet. So, ayun.
So when you record now, you don't see the person you're talking to, like
yeah,
it's not.
at the start, syempre naka-video kami, hi, hello, ganon. And then after, but during the actual recording, just to parang to get as best a quality of audio as possible, we turn the video off na lang.
Oh wow.
Yun.
That's
So
super challenging. I can
so
imagine.
beforehand, I actually like, warned them, parang, I'm so sorry if I cut you off in the middle of your because I thought that you were done speaking, blah blah blah. Yun. So that's part of my like spiel beforehand na.
Yeah.
Yun.
Interesting.
So, and of course, like it's parang it makes them more comfortable then. The fact that parang if you're the guest, I guess it makes them feel more comfortable na hindi naka-video for some reason. So, ayun. Kasi they're not like moderating anything anyway. So, ayun.
Right. Tristan, Pawi.
Mostly the same. Like at times we record with video. Like kasi nga, it's easier to connect or to like signal each other. But like I have the worst internet sa amin, so that's why I'm here. so I'm the one who often has to turn off my video. But then, it's really, I think si Pao can explain it better because he's the one who handles the tech side. But like, we try to keep the video on if we can assess na it works. But then if wala, we turn it off. But then sa scheduling rin, it's like we scour like the deep parts of the internet. Like we got guests from Reddit. We got
Craigslist.
Craigslist. Yeah. So it's like it's fun rin kasi like kung saan kami napupunta eh. Like we saw this guy sa Reddit that he posted a thread about how he got into video games, and then we just invited him, and then pwede siya. Let's do this.
He happened to be Pinoy, by the way. Yeah. That's how, because at first it was just something that floated on my feed. I was like, oh, this has 2,000 plus upvotes. I'm like, oh, from the Philippines? Okay, let's go.
Do you curate your guests na Philippine only guests?
Yes, it's mostly in the Philippines because we're really trying to show like career options in Manila, but there are also plans to like invite
or within the country,
Manila, the country. Hindi tayo imperialist. So, imperial Manila.
Yeah. No, but we Tristan and I have been discussing this for a while, but we have Filipino American or Filipino immigrant guests lined up who are actually pretty well known. We're just kind of waiting for the right time to like.
Can we announce it, ba? No.
No. Because then we'd be making promises too. So it's like, okay, now we need to do it. But pandemic was actually there were some blessings that came with the lockdown for podcasts. The reason why Tristan and I got so fired up this year was because our podcast, or I think everyone's podcast, kind of surged like end of March or around April. That's when people just started staying at home, and then lo and behold, like Filipinos were listening to lots and lots of podcasts because they just need more stuff to. And now here's the thing. I think it's kind of plateaued now, that some people are like commuting, but that's the weird thing. I always kind of champion podcasts as like the ideal thing you listen to while in your car. So I'm like surprised that's not quite adopted here. Maybe not yet. So yeah, in terms of scheduling, absolutely right. It's like so much easier to get people. And I think if it wasn't for our remote work environment, we actually wouldn't be able to do these weekly episodes. So great.
Yep. Yeah, probably like this week we have a recording tomorrow and then Friday. So back to back. Kasi they all said, yes, we're free this week. So
do you guys ever get tired from just talking to people?
No, we need because
Yeah.
we don't talk to people anymore.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why also a lot
Yeah.
of people are taking up podcasting now.
Yeah.
Because they need to talk to someone.
Like what B said,
friend.
it's as if they're talking to you, you know. That's they have memes about that where you feel like you're friends with the podcast host, like you feel like you know them like that, but
Yeah. So the pandemic has pros and cons. Like it has given you pros and cons.
yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
B was able to start hers, so
Yeah, for sure. I think is it because podcasts, maybe people don't realize how much time goes into making podcasts. Um, but yeah, I feel like maybe that's why a lot of
Well, I think many people are getting into podcasts kasi nga there are lower barriers to entry. Like, it's as long as you have a mic and a recording device, kahit gaano ka
It's
rudimentary
cheap.
siya, it's still a
yeah.
podcast. It's like the public radio of today. Even dati, like you can just like turn on a station and
And it's
broadcast.
on demand. I think that's why it's an in thing now.
yeah.
In demand to the point na it's getting saturated na rin. Kasi like,
Yeah,
dami na
yun
rin
nga. I
eh.
was gonna ask like how do you pick out which podcast to listen to now in this very rich landscape?
Yeah.
Best podcast of 2020.
Let's just trust the curation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering. Podcast consumption is interesting because maybe even me as a consumer, sometimes I'll like listen to too much of a podcast and that's it. You only become regular for so long. I don't know if that's with any of you, but for instance, we put out so many episodes of Inside the Industry, and one person who's a friend of ours kind of messaged me, and he's like, "Dude, I don't know why I'm so late to the game, but I just discovered your podcast," and I'm like, great, you'd love these episodes. And then I linked him 3. He's like, you don't understand. I listened to all the episodes already.
Oh my
I'm
god.
like, crap. I'm like, then we don't have much more. I'm like, stay tuned then,
Yeah.
For me, the problem with, like, I love political podcasts. The problem with that is, of course, it's based on what's on current events. So if something like explosive happens, they're gonna, like, all these podcasts will talk about the exact same thing. So it really, parang, diba? For example, like this US debate between Trump and Biden, like,
Oh my
for
god.
sure, when I wake up tomorrow morning, it's just
Yeah.
all Trump and Biden yung
It can be
topic.
ridiculous.
So parang I really have to weed out like which shows have the best parang commentators siguro. Ayun, the smartest commentators, the funniest, yung mga ganun. Tapos napansin ko rin, like, going back to podcasting becoming a thing during the quarantine, like a lot of people from different industries have started their own podcasts at home, and they all interview each other. So like, for example, dun sa comedy industry dito sa Pilipinas, so my friend parang started his own comedy podcast and he interviews other comedians, and then this other comedian interviews other comedians, and since it's a small circle, parang everybody just interviews each other. So the
Yeah.
same goes for like the music industry then, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So parang they all like just interview each other. So parang yun din yung, that's another parang problem of saturation that I find. Even like the guests are yung parang you're gonna run out eventually.
Yeah.
Yun. So parang ayun. So that's something to think about, I guess, for people who want to go into parang interview podcasts.
We're interviewing each other right now.
Yeah.
This is exactly that.
I think din sa sports na, since there are stuff actually happening already, so we have all these podcasts by like different like publications, and then yun nga, parang bigla na lang may hot topic like the CJ Cancino, the UST bubble, and everything. So parang bigla na lang paunahan na ng guest, and then like parang it really is like the first mover advantage. Whoever gets like the talent first, I guess, like you'll just only listen to that podcast, because like by in the succeeding podcast, like it's almost like audio. It's like how in TV, like agawan din kami ng mga Rappler Talk guests, right? Like in sports. And that's another thing, like if I haven't answered Amanda's question pala on managing. But then I have been yeah, so as a multimedia sports reporter, so I'm always on the field interviewing, and I'm also on cam for Rappler Talk and in my vlogs. And for me, like, interviewing is super normalness that I cannot tell the difference between audio, video, face to face, because I'm already like I standardize it like, oh, I'm just speaking to someone. And I think like, yeah, and so like in sports, I think that's like how in sports, like how I weed out. And I'm sorry, like, let me, well, I'll answer it one by one pala the question. So like I'll just complete my point first on like what's happening in sports. So yun nga, paunahan ng guest, and then like yun nga, first mover advantage becomes so important because bigla na lang all these podcasts out there, for me, in my opinion, sa sports, they're just too long, and like yung halatang unedited, they're just like live Zoom calls na ano pinapublish like that. It's not like us in Rappler that we edit it and we make it very consumer friendly. So I think that's still something that like the industry in here in the podcast industry in the Philippines has to improve on also. I mean, like, it's easier, but then it's nice to actually put the effort into editing also. And then in terms of managing it naman, especially in the situation there's just like small like as like as someone juggling different hats here also, like I think I also experience actually uh I also experienced podcasting before the pandemic, which is for the inside the industry nga,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
yeah, so that's where like, and also I had a fellowship in Darwin, Australia, for the same women in news and sport, where I had training on radio. So I think like that's how it all kind of came back also to podcasting. Like, oh, I didn't get to use like whatever I learned about radio when in the past year, because I was all still doing videos, I was still writing, I was just covering the SEA Games, everything was on the field. So I think so bigla na lang may opportunity na, oh, I can apply what I learned on radio also. So yun, parang it's a lot of like, well, especially as a narrative podcast, it's a lot of descri- describing, and then only using short sentences. I think that was how I had to adjust, like writing versus video versus like narrating a podcast. Like I use super short sentences, and then I try to let the talent describe everything
Yeah.
also. So I guess that's like the main difference that I see. And then editing is also a different factor altogether na. Yun.
Right. So I guess be jumping off from what you said, like you're wearing different hats at the moment. You're a podcaster, you're a reporter, both on cam and written. But for you guys, how do you integrate podcasting into your work at Rappler?
I think for me, it's basically scheduling and constant communication lang with your boss, especially that targeting Tokyo is all me. And then I just have to inform like my boss na, oh, I'm interviewing this talent already. This is in my outlook. I'm going to be the one edit. This is the script. I'm gonna pass it at this time, and then I'm going to edit also, because yeah, para with news picking up, it's become like, you gotta it's natural for us to let go of the features and yung mga um not so like pressing, like, not so relevant na outputs also. So it's all, oh, focus on this news and
Whatever's
everything.
trending.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I think that's where it gets so it gets so crazy lang. So I think it's all about scheduling and like just I always pray that oh my God, sana wala mangyari
Yeah. Oh,
so that I can
actually,
work on this.
how long does it take for you to do one episode of Targeting Tokyo?
For me, like, so I do my interview. It's an hour, and then I work on the script. Maybe it'll take me around. Oh wait, the transcript pa pala. So that's another thing. So you have to transcribe like whatever, how long it will take you to transcribe, and
Oh,
you have to you have to pass the script, which is actually a little bit easier lang than video scripts because pag video, I have to think of all the materials that's going to be shown on the video also. Pero pag audio naman, it's all cut, 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 and but then I have to think of what I'm going to say naman. That's the only thing I have to say, and then form the story. And sometimes it takes me a day or two because on the first day I'll be like, I don't like how this is flowing, or there's something wrong. Maybe I'll have a different idea the next day. Yeah, it's not like when you're reading your own articles. I think like maybe mas kabisado ko na like my writing style or like how ideas should flow on in an article compared to like in a audio podcast that's around 13 to 15 minutes long. That's a lot of content. So, yun, parang I think that's what I had. Then the editing's around 1 to 2 days
hmm.
after the approval. So maybe it can be done like in a week, pero what's happening right now is it takes me a month because yun nga, that's all the other news that pops up here and there in sports.
Yeah. It's hard what you're doing.
Yeah, it
So
is.
how about you, Margie? Like, how does it um integrate into your life, podcasting, into your life as
Um,
a Rappler editor?
Rappler. Well, since I'm opinion editor and the voices section is a party of one. So I basically have I kind of have like in the morning I'm a desk editor. I'm part of central desk, so I take care of editing news stuff and world stuff. But in the afternoon I kind of have free reign. So most of my day is spent. Most of my afternoon is spent editing opinion pieces and accepting them. But yun nga, so parang I kind of have the leeway to schedule recordings and to edit whenever I please, I guess.
Yeah.
Where I just try to stick to a bi-weekly schedule that the podcast has to come out every 2 weeks. Yun. So I don't know. It's very easily integrated into my work life. I think what's unique lang about it is yun nga, parang my job has never really entailed interviewing people.
Right.
Like I've been in journalism for a while, but my forte really isn't in interviewing or in yun nga, parang in talking to sources. Hindi yun yung yung thing ko. So yun nga, parang medyo learning experience din siya for me. Because it needs to tap into an aspect of yourself that I don't normally tap into, especially since I'm kind of introverted, believe it or not. Ayun. So
What
it's easy.
goes on behind the scenes in your when you do the podcast? Because like B does a script, then has it approved.
Yeah.
How about for an interview podcast?
Right. For the topics to begin with, it depends on like current events. Parang if there's like an offshoot, or if there is nothing happening, it's really just like a random thing that comes out of the top of my head. So, for example, BDSM, wala yung context. Parang I just thought na okay, this is a good topic, and then I send a call out there. I used to think that Facebook and Twitter would be like my parang first line of defense, or first whatever, first resort. And then I would really like try to dig further. Pero like I said earlier, it turns out that my first resort is very effective. So it hasn't gotten to the point where I have had to really parang try to convince someone to get onto the podcast. Ayun, and then once I find someone, someone actually messages me na parang, I can be that person, blah, blah. Ayun, I look into the background as much as possible into the person, and then we set up a recording date, usually within the same week. And then we record for roughly 30 to 40 minutes. And I would like to thank the prod team of Rappler because I can't edit for shit. So, ayun. So basically what I do is, ayun, after I get the audio file, I send an edit list, like a script, so more or less. And then send it over to the prod team. And before I know it, it's a podcast. Yun.
Okay. So there is still like a lot of, it's not just like a rambling conversation, I guess. There's also
Oh no,
like,
of course not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course not. But yeah, I forgot to mention, like beforehand, I have to prepare a set of questions, and I have to have it vetted by several editors. And yun, my editors are always like very enthusiastic in adding questions and giving more context. Yun. So ayun, parang just polishing up what I can ask. So by the time I get to interview the person, it's a very, very set interview actually.
right. How about Pawi and Tristan? How does podcasting enter your Rappler work?
I
You
think
go first.
yeah, okay. I think it's like I think B and Margie edited they've already mentioned it na it's really about scheduling kasi like what we do, like example for this week, we schedule 2 podcasts. So just in case we become busy the following weeks, at least meron na tayong naka-line up. So it's like fitting in kasi we are working as producers. So as you know, production work, it's not that easy. Like we have videos we need to shoot. We have like art. We also have articles. We have other podcasts that we have to produce. Now we are the ones behind the scenes. So it's like fitting ourselves in. Na, okay, we have to produce ourselves. Kailan natin gagawin to? It can be a challenge. That's why it helps na yun nga. If my free time this week, sige, let's try to get 2 or 3 episodes recorded para in the next weeks when we are like when a let's say a roundtable discussion takes up most of the week and you'll be busy doing logistics, creating questions, shooting it. At least hindi mo na problema na ay may podcast pa ako. And of course, you don't want to make a podcast na okay, i-rush na lang natin to para may mapalabas kami. Kasi like the thing with inside the industry, every week we release an episode every Monday. So it can be kind of grueling. I mean, it helps rin na when I was the one doing it solely, I had to do like what B was saying, na to transcribe it, create editing notes, and then send it to our prod team. Luckily, si Pao, he has a background in editing. so right now, after we record, Pao,
Ay na naman eh, si Pawi.
Yeah. That's how I got tricked into this whole thing. But no,
yeah, diba?
you know, I had the kind of like the opposite journey as everyone, in which most of you came from like the more journalistic writing background. I really came onto Rappler as a media producer, and writing was something that I barely had until my first Rappler pieces were actually the articles we put for Inside the Industry. And actually, so my journey was counter because that actually led me. Tristan started entrusting me with writing more articles for Hustle.
Yeah,
So
kasi,
yeah,
kasi like for like example for Hustle, since I'm the section head, like all the articles I have to like vet it, do preliminary editing, that kind of thing. So you add that to my role as a producer. So parang after a while rin, I also asked my seniors na I'm kinda overloaded. So maybe can I ask Pao to help me with the other media stuff? Kasi like balancing all these roles, it really takes up even my weekends. So you know, so it's really helping each other out and scheduling. So
Yeah.
it helps that there's 2 of us.
Yeah.
In terms of integrating it into our output, the podcasts have kind of affirmed themselves as a viable product. So what we're seeing now is that the podcasts are just becoming another kind of output for storytelling.
Yeah.
In fact, to the point that because Tristan and I work with brands. Also, we did our first branded episode for Inside the Industry for Sun Life. That could have been a video series for them. That could have been an article. They chose a podcast. So it doesn't necessarily add to the work. It adds to the kind of work we can produce, and maybe a piece that you're thinking about that Tristan, there's sometimes where you and I like want to interview someone, right, for like maybe an article, but then we're like, wait, hold on, we have a podcast. Like we can just interview them as a
Yeah,
podcast.
kasi like dati I used to do profiles rin, like of people.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of time. So like if you're gonna create a 1,500 word profile on a person, baka it's better to hear their story from their words. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not always the case, pero like at least there's an option na, oh, let's invite them.
Yeah, and to be honest, for me, it's like way easier. So in terms of you're talking about people's like turnaround, how long it takes for them to do this stuff. Luckily, Tristan and I have established a very rigid system. That's how we're able to do every Monday. We interview on either Wednesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays of the same week. Edit it usually in one pass. It's good because I have very stringent parameters when we record. I make sure that people have backup audio in case of all sorts of mishaps, and I've been an editor of media for like a video editor and an audio editor for like close to a decade now. So this is actually how I naturally operate. So I usually get that done in one pass, and we're usually good to produce publish by Monday.
Right.
Yeah, parang we have a good workflow. Like we kasi ano yun it's really reconciling having a structure but at the same time being flexible. So like I prepare the questions, we prepare the questions, and then we try to keep it as flexible pero also structured kasi hindi rin pwede any, di ba? So when it comes to editing, it's kind of easier.
Right. So, I guess if you want to come out with a weekly podcast, get yourself a partner in crime.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as fraud.
Get yourself a Pawi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, what are your guys' favorite episodes of your podcast or your favorite guests? Most memorable.
Ako yung what do you call this? The polyamorous couple.
The throuple ba tawag sa kanya?
I guess, but only two of the three came because the third person is more private about it. Yun. So that was very interesting kasi yun nga parang that was really something that I was never parang familiar with. But they were still within my circles.
Surprise!
Ayun, for once, kumanat, parang may gamit pala yung weird people around me. So, that was so interesting because they were so frank about it, and they were also so well-spoken about it. And it really goes to show that you need to talk directly to the people whose lifestyles you don't understand in order to parang get a better understanding of it. You can't really just guess from afar. Parang if there's something that confuses you, the best thing to do talaga about it is to reach out and what do you call this? Get to know their lives. Ayun. So hopefully my podcast will be able to parang add to that na rin.
How about you, B?
For me naman, like I've only had like 2 published episodes, but then I think my first one was memorable. It's about Christina Knott. Then it was Marjorie Didal. So that one I can say. But the third one was Jamie Lim. So siya yung anak ni Samboy Lim, the PBA legend. So I think I really enjoyed the interview because we actually came from the same high school. So and then I've actually never talked to her before, like in depth as an athlete, like because she just returned to karate after graduating summa cum laude in UP. So there was so much to cover on her. Like she was summa cum laude, then she's a SEA Games gold medalist. She's the daughter of a PBA legend, and then and it's so funny how we clicked pa. So I think like the the episode would be exciting as well because I think it would connect to a lot of Filipinos just because yun nga, like she Games gold medalist and the PBA and her dad being a PBA legend.
Hmm. Nice. How about Tristan first? Like, what's your favorite?
Okay. I think like kasi one episode we did recently was interview the interns. Hindi pala.
Yes.
The interns interviewed each other.
We weren't
So,
even there. I mean, we
yeah,
were.
so we
Yeah.
were producing it. So like we were telling them, okay, ulitin niyo yan. Bakit parang tunog nag-i-interview ko kayo, parang tunog na nag-job interview kayo. Di ba you're young? Like start speaking to young people.
We had to coach them.
Yeah. So parang we were coaching them to like how to do a podcast. So it was a 3-episode mini series, maybe that's what you call it. So it's like inside the internship, and then the kids hosted themselves, interviewed each other. So it was really fun producing.
Yeah, they got a lot of listens.
Yeah, I think
More than us. I was kind of offended, but
My intern was there.
yeah, he was the
Yeah.
last episode.
so parang it's gonna be a thing that we're gonna do maybe for the next batches.
Yeah, maybe for the
Yeah.
next cycle.
And
Yeah.
then for a guest that I really enjoyed talking to, like what Dee mentioned, na it's really fun talking to people na sobrang daming ginagawa, or like how do they manage those things. So we had Mickey Ingles. So he's actually a bar top-notcher. He's a sports lawyer. Pero we interviewed him for his book, a YA book. So,
Yeah, had nothing to do with those.
yeah. So parang he wrote a book na very Harry Potter-ish / Neil Gaiman na Alinam. So it's an underground Manila. So parang we talked to him about world building. So parang, pero at the same time, we can't like, it's not a vacuum naman na we can't turn a blind eye on his other life. So parang naaro namin na, it's like following the law, or like knowing the law, does it translate to also world building? Kasi you also have to create the laws of this world, ganyan. So you get to see this like fun little intersections between the two different worlds. So that's a fun episode. And siguro kasi nerds rin kami ni Pawi, like we're fans of genre fiction and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
and that's a very inside the industry episode,
Yeah.
because 99% of the guests are people who wear different hats, just like us, and that's the overall message that we're trying to share with the audience, that you should try different things, right? That's the only way you're gonna be able to know what kind of path you want to take. We have so many lovely episodes that are all cherished memories for me. I'm just gonna randomly pick one and say the Sweet Ecstasy episode. We interviewed the owners of Sweet X. Shout out to them, and I order their burgers like almost every week. But that was significant. It might have just been luck, but that was one of the first episodes right after pandemic hit, and Tristan and I pivoted right away. We started this Future of series where it's inside the industry, the future of. We started with radio, right, Tristan?
Yeah, kasi you can't discount na industries are badly hit by the pandemic. So
yeah. And actually, that's when our listens spiked, and I think it's because of them. I think a lot of people were listening to their episodes seriously, because here's two small business owners with a kick-ass restaurant. Pandemic hits them, and a lot of what they said ended up being echoed in the later episodes. But it laid the groundwork for what I think a lot of businesses are doing now. They were talking about not only pivoting to delivery, right? Their restaurant, not only pivoting to delivery and delivery apps, but brainstorming on what else they can deliver about their brand, because their brand is more than just the food, right? So they started a Sweet X Spotify playlist. They were more active on social media, and it really kind of was an inspiration for a lot of businesses that probably tuned in and that were like looking for answers.
Yeah, and I think what's great about those episodes, kasi we don't focus lang on yung mga, okay, positive tayo, let's think positive, let's find a way how to make it work. Pero we also interviewed like businesses that closed, so like Nokal. Like, so paano kayo ngayon? So it becomes also very may introspection siya. Like, okay, this is what's happening. This is what we'll do to try and fix it. So it's not just like, if kaya ko, kaya nyo rin. It's not that kind of interview.
Right. So I guess to wrap up the conversation, what's next for your podcast, Margie? Let's start with you.
Yun. So, like I mentioned earlier, airing tonight. Well, of course, they're gonna come out later. Pero the latest episode will be based on the 48th anniversary of the Declaration of Martial Law. I have a guest named Richard Mendoza. He's a 27-year-old who used to be fiercely pro Marcos and then changed his mind over the years, and I get to hear how that happened. Yeah.
Wow. Any dream episodes that you want to do in the
Dream
future?
episodes, oh my God. Mga nasa kulto.
Oh my God, that would be super
Dream
interesting.
episode ko yan. Speaking of which, okay, I'm sorry kung may INC listeners dito. Pero yun nga, I want to interview someone who like used to be INC and then changed their mind and got out of it. But of course, it's like notoriously hard to find because they're gonna get bullied. So, ayun. Parang,
I think pag ganun, kailangan voice changer na. Oh, gago.
I mean, there's no video anyway. You can keep them anonymous. So, yeah.
But if you want kulto, I know sa Cavite, like there's a legit cult doon.
Exactly. Ayun. So, ay talaga. Ayun. Sige, maybe. Ayun.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Para sa mga yung wild, ano yung show sa Netflix? Wild.
Wild Wild Country. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Oh, wow.
Parang ganun. Like, they're rich people na sa sariling anak daw ng Diyos.
Oo.
Yeah. Yeah, you should interview like a prophet, Margie. Like someone who...
I know. Or maybe I should
That's
just be a prophet and then
Yeah,
just start.
Okay, that's
Like,
a different podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For us naman, we just got an email right before this, but we're excited. We're gonna be interviewing Direct Avid of Hayop Ka, which is coming out on Netflix in a couple weeks, I think, from this recording. So if that sounds familiar to all of you, I think that's the first animated Filipino film on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
That's what the whole buzz is.
Netflix original daw siya.
Yeah.
It's original, yeah.
So that's what's next. Yeah.
Right. How about D?
Yeah, so I did say that my episode on Jamie Lim is coming up next, and I'll also be and for the people that I still want to interview, like hopefully because we have around like 15 to 20 more Olympic hopefuls, so I hope that I'll get to really cover them, and my goal is to really interview Kaloy Yulo. I mean, like we always produce stuff on him, but then it's really just hard to get a hold of him recently. So especially that he's in Japan. So like hopefully we can make something out of it also.
Shout out to Kaloy Yulo.
Kaloy, replyan mo ako sa Facebook.
There you go.
Dami nag-message sa kanya kaya.
So, I guess before we go, where can people listen to your podcast? Pare-pareho na naman atang platform.
Pare-pareho platform. Ano yung platforms natin? Google Podcasts.
We're like in everything. We're in everything. But
Stitcher, Spotify.
But what let's tell people like what they search or whatever. Or like what our names are.
So search Rappler I've an Opinion. And it comes out every other Wednesday at 8 p.m.
Yeah, and then for us that's Hustle Inside the Industry. Did I say Inside? Is that even a word? Hustle Inside the Industry. I think it gets confusing for people because it doesn't say like Rappler, I think. But yes, it's Hustle Inside the Industry. We're on all those platforms. And also we always give this shout out, but if you got a sense of what our podcast is from this recording and you are a professional or business owner with a story to tell, maybe you can actually be a guest. So you can actually email us. That's at hustle@rappler.com.
And disclaimer lang, like when you're searching sa Apple Podcast, it's really important that you put hustle inside the industry. Kasi if you just put inside the industry, it's actually a podcast na It's
No,
about
there's a
the adult
lot.
industry. The first
Oh.
one lumalabas, it's about the adult industry. So like, that's not,
Well,
yeah, hindi kami kasama ni Pawi doon. So,
we'll interview them too, though.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Sayang.
yeah, so,
Or people can just look for that.
yeah. ibang,
Right. How about B? What do people
get-
search?
You can just search Targeting Tokyo, and then it's under Rappler Podcast, and then it is the light blue album cover with the sky view of Tokyo.
Yeah,
So
very
you can see
pretty.
Tokyo Skytree, Tokyo Tower. Man, like I do love the graphics. Thanks, Nico.
Yeah, thanks, graphics. Yeah.
Yeah, the graphics are awesome for all your podcasts. So yeah, thanks guys for sharing your thoughts.
Yay.
Thank
And
you.
hey.
yeah, thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of Rappler Talk. Stay tuned for part 2 because we will be interviewing another set of Rappler casters who are doing the hard news podcast naman. So yeah, stay tuned to that and we're good. Thanks everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Thank
See you
guys.
around.